Glynn O'Leary, who's the CEO and co-founder of Transfrontier Parks Destination. Glynn, thank you so much again for joining us tonight.
It's a pleasure, and thanks so much for arranging this. It's great to be able to sort of share our story with you.
Good. No, it's, I've been super excited to chat to you for the last week or so, because I'm a big fan of some of the initiatives that you've been involved with over the last 15, 16 years. And I think what you're doing has a lot to offer our clients and international guests wanting to come to Southern Africa. So before we start, I just want to let everybody know, as per tradition, I'm drinking a very fine glass of red wine from the Hemel and Ardor Valley. It's a wine from the vineyard called Hermanus Pieterfontein, and it's a 2014 Demata, one of my favorites. And if you haven't checked out this wine, you've got to do yourself a favor. It is really, really special. The label has a big HPF on it, so you can't miss it when you go looking. Glynn, glass of red you've got there. Where's it from?
This is a glass of red. It's a pinotage from a little farm in the Klaasvoorts area of the Breda Valley, and the farm is called Koi Klaas. It's actually a farm in which I have a small interest. It was a project we set up with the community trust, who own the majority share in the farm. They're about 30% owners. Okay. I have black partners who own 35%. So it's a really good example of how people have been able to work together and create an interesting project and a successful wine brand.
Cool, awesome.
So I'm hoping that at the end of this, we'll get an order of 20 or 30 cases from you, Warren.
Well, we love red wine, and we've hit it quite hard over the lockdown period, so our stocks are low. I'm sure you can do a good deal on a couple of cases for us.
We can deliver next week.
Cool. I've got a couple of late arrivals. I'm going to let them in, and then we can carry on going. Okay, right. While the last couple of guys are joining us, Glynn, maybe you can give us an idea of what TFPD Transfrontier Parks Destination is all about, and when you guys started the business.
It goes back to around 2004, maybe slightly before that. I was involved in a company at that time in Botswana. We had won a concession, interestingly, in Mozambique, on the Mozambique side of Kruger National Park, in the very early days of the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park. And I had the opportunity at that time of meeting up with Kingsley Holgate, a well-known explorer, and I was introduced to him by a great guy, environmental architect, Johan Lowe. And we were sitting chatting one day, the three of us, and talking about this whole concept of creating a route through the Transfrontier Parks. They were in their relatively early days of formation. That time, I think there were 7 of them that span 9 countries. I think there are a few more now. But we talked about this whole idea of being able to do a journey through an area that covered one Transfrontier conservation area, and then the possibility of actually linking them. And Kingsley, as you probably know, has this story he always tells. He carries a calabash with him. He fills it with water from the Indian Ocean, and as they travel across Southern Africa, they collect water from different water sources, and then eventually pour it into the Atlantic. And the whole concept is that you can take water out of these different areas and pour it into another area, and it all blends, and nothing changes. So that was what sort of gave us the idea of calling the company Transfrontier Parks Destinations. And our idea was to try and establish ourselves in a number of these Transfrontier parks. And that's what we've done. It took some time, but we have a presence in the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park. We have a presence in the Kgalagadi Transfrontier Park, which I think we'll talk a lot more about later. and
Yes.
then also in the Maloti-Drakensberg Transfrontier Conservation Area. So we are sort of scattered around South Africa.
Yeah.
Originally, we sort of started out being very purist about it and saying we would only really look at being inside the Transfrontier parks. But eventually we got approached by different people and asked if we would take on a particular project. And as we did, some of them were further and further away. So we had to sort of change our mantra a little, and we now describe ourselves as working in, adjacent to, or en route to a Transfrontier park.
Maybe I'll stop you there quickly, because some people might not even know what a Transfrontier Park is.
It was an initiative that was started back probably in the late 1990s. I think it was at a time when there was the talk of what was going to happen with Kruger, the need to expand the grazing area for animals. And there was a lot of discussion between the conservationists of how were they going to try and create areas where animals could roam freely as they used to do before sort of colonial boundaries were put in place and fences and things like that. So the initiative started in the Kgalagadi Transfrontier Park, as I recall, where already Botswana and South Africa shared a common park. Theoretically, you could only drive on the South African side if you were entered from South Africa, and you could only drive on the Botswana side if you entered from Botswana. Yep. But of course, there was no fence in the middle of it, and so the animals were able to roam freely, and the authorities had an agreement that they would look at conservation together. Okay. And in about 2000, I think, or maybe, yeah, I think it was about 2000, that became an official Transfrontier Park. Its name was changed. They used to be, it was the Kalahari Gemsbok Park on the South African side, and the Gemsbok National Park, I think, on the Botswana side, and it became the Kgalagadi Transfrontier Park. And shortly after that, the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park started, which is a joint venture between South Africa, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe. And what many people might not know is that when the Mozambique side was added to the South African side, it increased the size of the park. Kruger itself is about 2.1 million hectares, and the Mozambican side added another 1.1 or 1.2 million. So that park in total is about 2.3 million hectares. The Kgalagadi, on the other hand, is about 3.2 or thereabouts. It's huge by comparison to Kruger.
Yeah, my info said 3.5 million, which is about double, which is crazy.
I think that's right. And then, oh, sorry, I said Kruger 2. It's Kruger's 3.1, 3.2 now is the Great Limpopo Park. But then the Gonorrhea area adds another 400,000 or 500,000 hectares to it. So it's about 3.5, 3.6 million, and the Kalahari is 3.7 actually, which is about the size of Switzerland or close to.
Yeah, it's quite amazing when you think about the sizes. It's just huge pieces of land, and yeah, very cool that it's managed properly, and that to this day you actually don't need a fence running through a park, which is great.
Exactly. And one of the interesting things, of course, which is always a challenge to get people's minds around, is that in a park of that size, I think there are around 400 lions living in the whole of that park. Yep. And you know, sometimes there are visitors who are disappointed because they don't see lion around every corner when they go there. And it's, you know, something we really work hard at trying to explain to people. It's a privilege, not a right, to see animals when you go to a place like the Kgalagadi. you should really be going there for the whole wilderness experience, because that's truly what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree. I think generally when guests do come to any wildlife experience in Southern Africa, they're expecting to see the big five, and it's something that we need to carry on talking to them about, because it's not only about the big five. And, you know, there's so much more to see in these parks. And I think what you're doing out in the more sort of arid desert areas is just incredible. And for me, those are even more special than going to a normal bush environment. It just offers you such a different game experience. So, yeah, it's good.
And it's not just about the game experience, it's about the whole wilderness experience. It's about the size of the place. You know, there are not many places that you can go where you can stand literally on a hillock and the top of a dune, and you can see the horizon for 360 degrees without seeing any other human being or vehicle or building or anything. It's just the landscapes are enormous. Everything about the Kalahari is enormous.
Yeah. There's something that I read about on your website about your initial vision for your business, and being an entrepreneur in South Africa obviously is to me and obviously to you guys quite an exciting opportunity that we were given, because there is opportunity everywhere. And, you know, part of your whole fundamental outlook is to try and commercialize a community's tourism asset, which it sounds great. And I bet you it's not that easy, because you're dealing with someone's heart and soul. And as an outsider, you're coming into a project potentially and trying to monetize it, which I bet could be a bit of a challenge at times.
It certainly is. I think what makes our projects even more challenging is that we operate really in a sort of tripartite type partnership. So it's not just the community that are involved, but also various government departments invariably who are involved in supporting the communities in one way or another, whether it's from a social point of view or whether it's from a financial point of view. And so you've got varying expectations. You've also got to deal with the fact that people don't always understand the complexity of tourism. We, for example, in Mozambique had a situation where there were individuals who couldn't understand why you couldn't pay 10% of your turnover as a rental, because, and we said to them that in Kruger, the concessions don't pay that kind of price. And in Kruger, they have 1 million visitors a year, whereas on the Mozambique side, you won't see 1 million visitors in 20 years. Sure. And so you have that sort of understanding that sometimes is difficult. You also have NGOs that are involved sometimes in advising, and they create expectations in the minds of communities about how, you know, it's just so easy. You build a tent and you suddenly you're in tourism. They don't understand about what it takes to get a tourist to this tent, and and what it takes to manage the operation and things like that. So yeah, it is. It's certainly a challenge. But the other side of that challenge is that it is so rewarding when you are able to make progress and you get communities who understand and really do begin to understand how the tourism works, how you need to have marketing operations that work with you, how you need to have accountants and human resource people, so it's a learning experience, and it's a learning experience for them and for us.
You're obviously doing something right, because you've been in business for, is it 16 years now with TFPD?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's actually quite amazing when I think about it. You know, we started out with this sort of 10-bed tented camp on the Mozambique side of Kruger Park. And today I think we have close to 300 beds that we need to fill on any given night. We employ about 168 people. Yeah, and we've gone from a situation where I think in the first year of our operation, our salary bill was probably 100,000 Rand, and our salary bill now is more than 10 million Rand a year.
Wow. Wow.
So it has grown. But you know, for us, it's all about developing trust, and it's about operating in an environment of fairness. And I think that's sometimes a word that's forgotten. You know, we have to explain, even in our dealings with government and the communities, that we may be the business partner, but we're just ordinary people, and we also have our limitations in terms of the funding we're able to source and things like that. So and in our relationship, it can't be only fair in one direction. It has to be fair in both directions. Yeah. So for us, even when it comes to an agreement, we are always willing to sit down and re-look at an agreement a couple of years later, and if necessary, renegotiate the terms. Because at the start, you can't always know and understand what the future is going to hold. Yeah. So you base your negotiation and your agreements on what you perceive to be the present risk. Yeah. And things then change, and it's always good to be able to sit down and to talk to people and say, this is why we did it this way, and this is what's changed, and therefore this is why we're prepared to make a change or do something, or we need to relook at what we're doing.
Yeah. Great. So I think let's move on to Xaus Lodge, and I hope I'm saying it right, because it's a very interesting word with an exclamation mark in the front of it. Do you pronounce that K quite heavily, or do you just say it as a K, as in Xaus?
Well, it depends. You actually pronounce it Xaus with a click on your palate. Xaus. Right. For Nigel, we say that if you if you're phonetically challenged in the Nama language, then it's fine for you to say Xaus, as in German. And that's how most people pronounce it. But it's always a great talking point.
It is. Yeah. I think to start with, I'm gonna try and get a video on for everybody to have a little look at. I hope I can get it right. Let's have a little look at the video that your son Dylan put together for TFPD. So I'm going to hit play. Hopefully it comes out for everybody. So there's no sound because I've muted it, but just running through the slides here, it really is a breathtakingly beautiful setting for a lodge. And the vast piece of land, I mean, it really is incredible. I'm a huge fan of this type of landscape, so incredibly special.
Does he pan in on the lion on this one?
Not yet. Yeah, the lion's at the end of the little bit. I'm not. You can't see it, Glynn.
I can see the video now.
Okay. Yeah. So it really is quite an amazing piece of land. And was the lodge partly built when you guys took over as the management business?
No. The lodge, when I first saw the site, it was just the vacant land. Just to give you a bit of background to the lodge and to where it's located.
I'm going to play it once more while you talk.
Do that, yeah. Now, well, let me tell you the story quickly of the name Xaus Lodge. You'll see. Let me see if I can pick up the picture in particular. There's a spur of land that goes off into the pan. Yeah, just in front of you, there's a spur of land that goes of grass that goes into the pan. Just at that point, it's a salt pan, ancient salt pan. This bit of grass that grows into it. And when we were talking about the name for the lodge, it's in the top right-hand corner there. When we're talking about the name of the lodge, I had discovered that it was called Xaus Lodge. Now, Skray is a shortened version of a word called skitterij, and skitterij is the Afrikaans word for what you would get, which is very uncomfortable and unpleasant if you had to drink the water from that salt pan. So I said to some bushmen that were traveling with me, I said, just tell me a lady called Elsie, and said to her, imagine if you were working at the lodge and you had these German guests with you and there were candles on the table and they said to you, please explain the romanticism behind the name of the lodge, Xaus Lodge. And they burst out laughing and said, no, they couldn't do that. That would be too embarrassing for them.
I'm sure.
So they said, no, they think the lodge must have a new name. And Elsie stood on the deck at the lodge and she looked across the pan at the spur of land and she said, we must call it Xaus Lodge. And Xaus means heart in the Nama language. Okay. And it was such an amazing name and so appropriate because the lodge is actually located at the meeting point of two land claims that were submitted by the Kumani San, the Bushman community, and the Meer community, who are an old mixed race community that come from the area around Rietfontein, which is about 160 kilometers to the southwest of where we are. And these two communities had individual land claims. It was a bitterly fought claim and contested by sandparks who were reluctant to see any of the land excised from their park. And eventually they reached a settlement in, I think it was about 2002, where they agreed that each of the two communities would receive 25,000 hectares. And part of the settlement was that this lodge, which was called the Cooperation Lodge in the agreement, would be built on that site of the meeting point. So the name celebrated really the restoration of the relationships between the two communities and South African national parks. And it also sort of was manifest in the fact that the two land claims met at that point, and in the middle of this pan was this heart. So it was just such a great name for the lodge.
Cool. It's worked out well. I'm sure you get plenty guests really, asking about how it came across or how it came about, and definitely how you pronounce it, because it's not an easy one. I'm not even going to bother trying, I promise you. I wish I could. So tell us a little bit about the lodge. It's how far from Cape Town? How do you get there? You can drive there? Can you fly there? Yeah, the lodge is located in the southwestern sort of southern part of the Kgalagadi Transfrontier Park. It's 90 kilometers from Twerefieren, but to get there, it's best to kind of understand the journey. You can drive from Cape Town or drive from Johannesburg to Uppington, and then or you can fly into Uppington. From Uppington, there's a 260 kilometer road, good tarred road that takes you to Twerefieren, the entry point into the park. It is a true transfrontier park now, in the sense that you can enter on the South African side with your passport, and if you want to exit into Botswana, you go through the same border post. You can stamp out into Botswana, and then whilst you're in the park, you're actually then officially in Botswana, even though you're staying on the South African side. Okay. You can exit into Namibia at a border post at Mata Mata. But the road that
the tarred road up to the park is used extensively during the hot summer months by some of the European motor manufacturers who bring their vehicles out here for high-speed testing. So the road is actually licensed to do 260 kilometers an hour, I think.
Oh, wow.
The vehicles can use it with a permit.
Okay.
We sometimes think that our drivers also, without a permit, travel at 260 kilometers an hour on the road in our game drive vehicles, but fortunately not with guests on them.
Yeah.
So for us, typically, for us to go shopping from the lodge, we would go from the lodge on a 30-kilometer dune road that takes us over 91 sand dunes to get to the gravel road, then 65 kilometers south on the gravel road to Turefieren, and then 260 kilometers to Uppington. So we do a 720 kilometer round trip to go and buy the yogurt we put on the table for breakfast in the morning.
Sure.
And then our nearest corner cafe, so to speak, is in a little town called Askam. And Askam is where we go to buy our diesel and any very basic supplies. And there's a co-op there.
Okay.
And that's 180 kilometers in each direction. So we use something like 50 liters of diesel to go and buy 500 liters for our generator.
Sure.
So it makes it an expensive and challenging lodge to operate because of the distances and also the conditions. One of our American clients actually counted each dune, which is why we know that the lodge is located on dune 91.
I tell you what, Glynn, I think it's time you get some solar-powered game vehicles. Might save you some diesel, though. I know they're super expensive, but with all the sunlight you get in the desert, you could certainly do with a few.
Save us a fortune,
Yeah.
We just
need in terms of the lodge, then it's your normal sort of a game experience. So you go out and drives in the morning. Are there walking experiences?
It's a 24-bed lodge, so we've got 12 individual chalets for guests, each with its own deck overlooking the pan. So they've all got exactly the same view. Down onto the pan, we've got a waterhole in front of the lodge that's fed by, in fact, it's a waterhole within a waterhole. So we feed it with the natural saline water of the desert, which the Gemsbok enjoy. And then in the one in the middle, we feed that with the water from the swimming pool when we backwash the swimming pool.
Okay.
And that's where the lion go to drink. So we sort of try to attract the different types of animals. And then typically a day at the lodge would be an early morning walk. We would go out on a game walk with our guides. And they take you looking at the spoor and reading the newspaper of the day before, as they describe it, in the sand of the desert. And then talking about the medicinal qualities of properties rather of the plants and the roots, and just enjoying the amazing views and topography. And then come back to the lodge for breakfast, the latest breakfast, and then from there we take our guests down to the crafting village. We have a crafting village set up. It's just to replicate the way in which the Bushmen would have lived in the past. So it's not actually a living village, it's their place of work. And that's really important to understand because, again, from time to time, whenever you do something like this, you've always got to kind of deal with different expectations and how people view things.
Yes.
And we've never insisted that our staff or the Bushman crafters wear their traditional outfits, because we think that's wrong. It's up to them to make that decision on whether they are happy to do it or not. And Bushmen are very spiritual people. So they live in this world where if the wind's blowing from the wrong direction or they don't feel right, or the spirits are not in their favor, or whatever, they will do what they need to do. They won't do what you want them to do. And it's not right for us to want them to do anything. It's up to them to do what they feel is appropriate. So occasionally we'll have a guest from Holland or Germany say, I was disappointed because when I got there, I didn't see the Bushmen in their chais, and I was expecting to see them living as they used to live 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And my reaction is always to agree with them, to say you're absolutely right to be disappointed, because you have absolutely no idea how disappointed I am when I go to Amsterdam and I don't see everybody walking around in clogs.
You're quite right. Yeah.
And suddenly there's a silence and people say, oh, interesting, good point. So, but we do that, and it's just so incredible, because when you watch the crafters and you can actually sit with them, talk to them, they only talk Afrikaans, so it's sometimes difficult. The guides will translate, but just to be there with that peace, that amazing inner peace that you experience when you're there, to see them working away at doing it. I've often thought that we need to have a very high-powered workshop of very high-powered business people go to Xaus and then take them down and let the Bushmen teach them to drill a hole in an ostrich shell egg.
Yeah. Wow.
The shell of an ostrich egg, rather.
Yeah.
It is the singularly most difficult thing you will ever have done, with this little piece of twine and literally a steel pin with a point on the end of it.
Yeah.
And they just sit there, they drill. If it breaks, it breaks, and they throw it away and they start with the next one. But
Sure.
by the time you or I got to the 10th time of trying to do it unsuccessfully, we'd be cursing, stomping off, and saying, let's get a machine to do this.
Yeah.
So it's such an incredible experience. And going to Xaus it's a very spiritual place. Doesn't matter what religion you might be, it's about the kind of the calmness, the spirituality of the environment. So it's really great. And then in the afternoons, late afternoon, we do a pan drive. We take our guests out on a game drive vehicle. We've got another large salt pan in the few kilometers away. We go around that to go and see what's happening there. And then we end up on the top of a dune at sunset, or just before sunset, and we have drinks up on the top of the dune. And then just before the sun sets, our guides will invite the guests to actually sit on the ground. Now, it's something that I learned from a bushman who sadly is deceased now, but an amazing guy, Fit Pete. And Fit Pete used to take his guests, ask them to sit on the ground. He would always say that it was amazing how with these Western guests, when he would ask them when last did they sit on the ground in the sand, most of them couldn't even remember when they had. It was when they were a child. And he'd get them to sit on the ground and then explain to them that they were there to listen to the sunset. And they would generally have a smile and laugh or giggle and say, no, but we're going to watch the sunset. Wow. And his line was always to say to them, no, he said, you're going to listen to day turn into night in the Kalahari. Wow. And I can promise you it is the most goosebump experience that you will ever have. It's just incredible. I was on the dunes with a group of 13 fairly drunken characters from Nando's some years ago, and we were sitting there, and the guys had their drinks, and then we got them to sit down and listen. And after the sun had set, and it takes 2 minutes and 40 seconds from the time the sun touches the horizon until it sinks below the horizon, and in that time there was this total silence, and they just never got up. And eventually we had to say to them, listen, we need to move. But they were in absolute silence for easily 5 minutes, because it is just such an awesome experience.
Yeah. I want to talk about something that I found completely amazing, and I'm just going to flick to these images quickly. Give me a second while I sort out this. So I was reading on your website after we had the initial discussion, the Dark Sky Sanctuary award that you guys were given, and I hope everybody can see these images. They are truly spectacular. So after having a fantastic day, 2 game drives and watching the sun go down, go and enjoy your dinner, and then you get to see some of the most amazing stargazing probably in the Southern Hemisphere. So can you give us a little idea of what the Dark Sky Sanctuary is all about?
Yes. Xaus is a place where you often hear people say how you could reach up and touch the stars. Well, you truly feel like that when you're at Xaus. It is so amazing. And we had a visit a few years ago from a professor from New York who had been working on Nama brand, an application for Nama brand in Namibia for their declaration as a dark sky reserve, I think they were. He came by chance to Xaus Lodge, and he had with him a device called an SQM, which is a sky quality meter. Mm. And he stayed at Xaus for a couple of nights, and then he called us and he said, have you ever thought of having your lodge and the area that it's in certified? Because he said, I took some measurements and they work on a scale of 1 to 22, with 22 being the absolute darkest the sky can ever be.
Sure.
And he said to us, your sky measured 21.75 on my SQM. Wow. Since then, we've had measurements of, I think, even 21.95. And the only reason we can't get an absolutely dark sky reading is because the reflection of that Milky Way that you see there in the pan causes a light reflection into the sky, which prevents us getting a 22 reading on this SQM. Anyway, that started a very lengthy journey. Eleanor, who's on the webinar this evening, or the Zoom meeting this evening with us, she actually took control of putting together the application. I think there were days when she got desperate and we almost gave up. And when eventually we got all of our documentation together, and it wasn't just about documentation, it was a major, major exercise. We had to shield every single light in the lodge. We had to change our light bulbs to low emitting light bulbs. We had to get the agreement of the different communities to ensure that there wouldn't be any other developments within a 40 or wider radius of the lodge. We had to get the buy-in of South African National Parks. We had to get support from local government. So it was an incredibly complex and time-consuming exercise to get to the point. And we kind of like got everything together and submitted all of the stuff. And then the guy at the International Dark Sky Association in New York, where they sort of are based, came back to us and said, there's a bit of a problem here. We said, well, what's the problem? No, he said, you've got to be able to allow people to come and view this night sky 24 hours a day, because it's a condition of certification. So we said, but you knew that we were in this game reserve, and the game reserve gates close at 6 o'clock in the evening, or 6:30 in the evening. Sure. And only open at 6:30 in the morning. No, that's a bit of a problem. We said, well, that's the rules of the park, but apart from that, this is not New York and Central Park, so we have a challenge. Anyway, eventually, the guy who did the original SQM readings and was helping us with our application was a chap called George Tucker, professor. And he was fantastic. And he started to lobby for the establishment of or the creation of a recognition that would then allow for a dark sky certification, but with controlled access. And that's how the sanctuary came about. So we actually can claim to have initiated that category.
Okay.
There are now, I think, 10 in the world, and we are the only one in Africa. And then together with Nama Brand in Namibia, which is, as I said, is a dark sky reserve.
Cool.
So it's incredible. And what was really fantastic is that last year we had a visit from a journalist from National Geographic, and she was so taken with the place and wrote a beautiful story about the Xaus and the dark sky. And National Geographic then ran a poll saying to its readers, which would you prefer to visit, the Kgalagadi dark sky area or the Grand Canyon? And the Kgalagadi, our area, won the poll sort of by 62% to 38% or thereabouts.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's great.
Yeah, listen, I mean, stars for me, it's one of the special things about Southern Africa, especially in the desert. I think a lot of the Europeans and American clients that live in the big cities, they don't see it anymore. And we're very fortunate to have it pretty much on our doorstep, just a few more than a few hours drive from Cape Town, but very special.
It is, but it's a wonderful drive, and it's it's amazing to drive up from here, the West Coast area, and then up through the small Karoo and to up into the Strait. So we love the drive.
I'm going to ask everybody who's listening in, if they got any questions about Xaus, then please let us know. I just want to show one more image, because you did say that there were lying about, and there's a picture of a male. A little different, obviously, to some of the reserves in the Kruger and the Eastern Cape, but there he is at the entrance of Xaus, which is great. Cool photo.
Yes, they come and drink at the bird bath as well. That's quite close to the deck.
And then there's another image of lion. He's getting some shade for sure. And then there was also a picture of classic Sundowner setup. Yeah, which is really pretty special. So yeah, I mean, obviously we've had a long discussion about this incredible lodge, which I think has a lot to offer. Adam has asked which wild animals do you see up there? So obviously you see some cats and lion. Do you get any bigger animals? Desert elephants?
We don't in our area, or not that we've seen. Having said that, there was a sighting of a desert elephant up in the north towards north of Nosso, in sort of towards Union's End, on an occasion a couple of years ago. But no, generally speaking, the cats, there's quite an array of cats: lion, cheetah, leopard, and they're the black-maned lion, as you can see from those pictures. And they are a lot larger than the lion in the Kruger, or reputedly are larger. I've never sort of stayed around long enough to check. And then we have wildcats, civets, and various others. But then there are things like bat-eared foxes. We have giraffe that were reintroduced into the park a few years ago and have sort of expanded in numbers quite significantly. So I think there are 30 plus giraffe there now. Gemsbok is the iconic animal of the area, and wildebeest, zebra, and a large number of small animals, ground squirrels, what are those? The meerkats and various others. So And of course, the one thing that the Kalahari is famous for is it is host to 2/3 of Southern Africa's raptor species. So from a birding point of view, it's outstanding as a birding destination. And we have a lot of birding groups, specialist birding groups. There's a large number of owls that occur there.
Okay.
And then for those that do like snakes, there are also a fairly large selection of snakes. They're not necessarily my favorite, but they also need to have space. So, and they're there in the area.
Yeah. How many nights would you say is the right sort of the length at Xaus? You know, you driving all the way from Cape Town, or you flying into Upington? You know, is it a 3-night stay? Do you recommend longer?
For us, I guess it's a function of the nature of the client. It's definitely not less than 3 nights. And I say that because, you know, occasionally we have someone who wants to come and stay for a night. And that's invariably because they're trying to stay in the park itself, and they've got one night they can't get in the park at one of the Sandparks camps. So they want to come for a night, and that's almost a recipe for disaster, because they don't experience everything, and then they feel like they've missed out on something. 2 nights is really the minimum, and it just gives you 1 day of activity. Whereas if you stay for 3 nights, you can select your activities, you can have some sort of quiet time in between, and enjoy it and get to really know the environment. If I go there and I can see that amongst the people you've admitted, you've got Shannon sitting there.
Yes.
Well, Shannon will probably tell you should stay for 5 nights at least. So it really does depend. But you know, if people want a true break and to truly experience the wilderness, then less than 3 nights would be not doing you justice. But you could easily spend up to 5 nights staying there.
Yeah, I think we had a brief discussion about this last week, and post COVID-19, my feeling is that guests will want to travel to properties that are off the beaten track, get away from the masses, go out into the original sort of wildlife and wilderness areas and experience something really, really special and different with limited guests on your doorstep. And my feeling is that, you know, and next year is going to be a massive year for Southern Africa. I'm one of the positive ones. We're gonna get through this little hiccup. It's not little, but we're going to get through it. And then I think people will be driven to Southern Africa because of the wide open spaces and some of the experiences that you really can't get anywhere else in the world. So we'll certainly be pushing those aspects, you know, good self-drive experiences out into the wilderness areas.
I agree with you on that. And, you know, a couple of other things that, you know, people kind of underestimate the value of. For a start, only our management couple at the lodge are the only 2 people who are not from the area immediately around the Kalahari. So the other staff all come from the immediate area. They're all able to interact with guests and talk about their own lives in that area. And yet our head chef there, Linky, was working at in the restaurant one night. They'd done dinner, and a guest said he'd like to meet with her, and then introduced himself. And he turned out to be a chef trainer from the UK. And he, cut a long story short, he invited her to the UK to go and spend time there. He hosted her, I think, for about 4 weeks. And she spent time at the Mercedes-Benz motor racing site in the UK, working in their kitchens. She went and worked in a gastro pub. She worked in a pastry pub. So she's had fantastic experience. They produce the most amazing meals. And you know, to actually meet people like that in their home environment, who've had that kind of experience and can talk about it and share their experiences with you, is just special. It really is. And we've got some amazing people there.
Cool.
So I think it's, I mean, I love the place. I love the people. And I think a couple of other things is that we've won a number of awards for CAS, Responsible Tourism Awards at World Travel Market in London and in Cape Town, for the development of the sort of community development side of what we do. And it's, as a community, it's, I'm not sure that we mentioned it, but it's 100% community owned. And it's a lodge that was built, as I said, as a consequence of the land claim, and that the community believed at the time was a white elephant, that it was going to be left in the desert to just sink into the desert, that it would never work. And today it's a 4-star graded lodge. It is fair trade certified, and it has the dark sky certification and has won a number of awards. So it's an iconic destination owned by a local community.
Yeah. I can't wait to go there. I know I let everybody down in the O'Leary family a while back, but we won't talk about that because I'm going to get...
I'm glad you raised it, because I was not going to embarrass you, but...
No, happy to do that myself. There are some other properties in your stable. You know, you've got some great lodges, some cultural experiences. You know, Kieran, your other son is also putting some work into 4x4 experiences, and in particular, the lodge up in the Drakensberg called Xaus. And part of our business going forward will definitely deal more on that adventure market, guys that are wanting to go into the mountains, not only for mountain biking, but trail running, hiking, and again, just to get away from the carnage and the chaos of the cities. So, you know, we're really excited about the products that you have on your portfolio. And yeah, we're going to give it a go post COVID-19 and get people out there, because you do have something quite different. From an entrepreneur's point of view, I think the community-driven projects are just awesome. And, you know, going forward, I think Adam and I agree that's something that we need to look at going forward down the line, because you really need to get involved. If we can help these communities have properties that will be established over the next decade, 2 or 3 decades, that help their families, then just fantastic. So yeah, I think I take my hat off to you guys for sticking it out over a lengthy period, and I still think there's opportunities for growth.
I think you're right. I think you hit on a very, very important point. And you know, a place like Xaus it's the highest lodge in South Africa. It's situated at 2,226 meters. It gives you access via the chain ladder, which is on the property we manage, to the top of the amphitheater. So from Xaus you can hike to the amphitheater and back in less than 6 hours. So it's really, really amazing as a property. And the Batlokwa community, who own the property, in 2010, this property was derelict. One of the challenges is that if we don't help build rural employment, why would people want to protect conservation areas if they can't see the opportunity and the benefits of earning an income from the area?
Yes.
So, you know, if you look at that, you can't get closer to the Drakensberg Mountains than that. We often have a guest house in Cape Town as well, and we have guests who come and stay here, and we ask them where they've come from, and they will tell us they've been at the Drakensberg. And they'll say, but the only disappointing thing was that they felt that they were at the Drakensberg. They didn't feel they were in the Drakensberg, whereas at Xaus you're actually in the Drakensberg. It is quite spectacular.
Yeah, no, listen, I agree. I can't wait to get up there because the Drakensberg has a lot to offer. And it's not only for adventure clients, you know, it's a truly spectacular part of our country.
And then, you know, just sort of from my point, lastly, the Limpopo area, the culture and wildlife, you know, too much emphasis is placed just on wildlife and too little emphasis is placed on the people. And that also needs to change. We need to do more about balancing that emphasis between culture and wildlife so that people also have the opportunity to benefit and to demonstrate what it is that they have to offer to tourism. And that's where, you know, tour operators like yourselves that support that kind of initiative are fantastic, because we can only do it as a partnership. You know, we can't do it on our own. And we need that access to markets, but you need access to market through people who themselves are enthusiastic about it, because they've experienced it, they understand the need, as well as not just the amazing experiences, which they are, but also the need to make sure that these amazing experiences are promoted.
Well, we're keen. We still have the energy for it. We've obviously been in the business for quite a long time, but there's so much out there that we can add to our clients' experiences. And, you know, we've already been speaking for an hour. It's just gone in a flash. And what I'd like to suggest is we have you back on, because there's so much to speak about in terms of the cultural camps. I'd love to know more about the Beleni camp and the Bloberg camp and the 4x4 experiences linked to Mafefe. So there's always so much to chat to, but I think we're going to sign off for this particular session. We've really touched on quite a lot, and I'm excited to have you back and chat about some of the other products that you have. Yeah, Glynn, I think going forward, there's a couple of tough months ahead of us. We're still relatively unsure of is going to happen in South Africa over the next couple of months, but I'm pretty positive that we'll ride this storm, and then we can get back into doing what we do best, and that's offering incredible experiences to international clients in Southern Africa.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for the invitation, and cheers to everybody, and thank you for being there and watching and everything else. And next time when we talk about the cultural side of it, we'll invite Eleanor to join me, and she's like the walking encyclopedia of Limpopo.
Look forward to that. Glynn, thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Warren, thanks.
Bye-bye. Thanks, everybody.